After escaping the mind-numbing haze of the Lotus Eaters, Odysseus and his battered crew drag their ships onto a quiet, uninhabited island. It offers exactly what exhausted sailors need: wild goats for meat, fresh water, and a chance to finally sleep without looking over their shoulders. But across the water sits a larger, shadowy landmass dotted with caves. Instead of resting, Odysseus feels an itch. He wants to know who lives there. He selects 12 of his bravest fighters and rows toward the mystery. He brings along a single skin of incredibly potent wine, a gift from a priest of Apollo, so concentrated it normally requires 20 parts water to 1 part wine to safely drink. He suspects he might need an edge. That exact hunger to uncover the unknown is what made him a legend on the battlefields of Troy. Here, however, that curiosity is pulling him straight into a nightmare. Exploring the shoreline, they discover a massive cavern packed with pens of sheep, baskets heavy with cheese, and troughs overflowing with milk. His men panic. They beg him to steal the supplies and sprint back to the ship before the owner returns. Odysseus refuses. He insists on staying to meet the host, expecting the stranger to honor Xenia, the sacred ancient Greek law demanding strict hospitality and protection for any wandering guest. When the owner finally arrives, the ground shakes. This is Polyphemus, a Cyclops of terrifying proportions and a direct son of Poseidon, the god of the sea. The giant herds his flock inside, grabs a boulder 20 men couldn't budge, and plugs the cave entrance. By expecting a wild creature to honor polite society's rules, Odysseus has trapped his crew in a pitch-black box with a monster who obeys no one. Trying to salvage the situation, Odysseus steps out of the shadows. He tells the giant they are Greek soldiers and sternly reminds him that Zeus demands respect for travelers. Polyphemus laughs. He mocks their gods, snatches 2 of the soldiers off the ground, and eats them alive. Divine laws and clever rhetoric evaporate in an instant. Against raw, starving muscle, diplomacy is utterly useless. As the giant falls into a heavy sleep, Odysseus's first instinct is pure soldier. His hand drops to his sword, ready to drive it into the creature's chest. But he stops. This schematic illustrates the problem. Even if all 12 Greeks push at once, their combined force is a fraction of the stone's tonnage. Without the giant, the door remains shut permanently. The only machine capable of moving that boulder is the monster himself. The famous Greek tactician is stuck in a physics trap. If he fights and wins, he starves to death. His sword will only guarantee their execution. Dawn breaks, and Polyphemus eats 2 more men for breakfast before rolling the stone aside, letting his flock out, and sealing the surviving Greeks back inside. Odysseus needs an alternative to brute strength, fast. He spots a massive, drying olive wood club in the corner of the cave. Working in silence, the survivors chop away a section of wood, whittle one end down to a vicious point, and bury it under the dung. They simply cannot win a wrestling match. To survive, they have to exploit the giant's mind before attacking his body. Evening arrives. Polyphemus returns, seals the door, and consumes 2 more soldiers. With his crew shrinking rapidly, Odysseus sets his plan in motion. He walks right up to the monster and offers him a bowl filled with the undiluted wine he brought from the ship. This sacred vintage carries a high concentration of alcohol, designed to be diluted 20 times over before consumption. For a creature accustomed to nothing stronger than goat's milk, the gift acts as a physiological shock. The giant drinks greedily. Slurring his words, he demands to know the human's name so he can offer a guest gift in return. Odysseus carefully calculates his reply. He tells the beast his name is Nobody. The Cyclops chuckles and grants his twisted reward. He will eat Nobody last, before collapsing into a drunken sleep. Odysseus has successfully neutralized an insurmountable physical force, using only a sharpened branch, a bottle of wine, and a calculated lie. As the giant snoring rattles the cave walls, the survivors reach for their weapon. Odysseus and his surviving men were trapped inside a dark stone cave with a sleeping, man-eating Cyclops. They had to act now. Brute force offered no way out. If the Greeks simply killed the giant as he slept, they would lack the strength to move the massive boulder blocking the exit, leaving them to slowly starve in the dark. They needed a tactical solution. Quietly, the men pulled a sharpened olive wood stake from its hiding place. They thrust its tip into the glowing embers of the fire, heating the wood until it burned red hot, smoking with deadly promise. Lifting the weapon together, they drove the burning stake directly into the Cyclops' single eye. The giant woke in agony, permanently stripped of his sight, thrashing blindly around the cave and knocking aside boulders in his rage. This violent act served a precise purpose. It was the necessary first step in a psychological war where human intellect had to conquer overwhelming brute strength. The blinding created an immediate secondary danger. The giant's agonizing screams echoed across the hillside, alarming the neighboring Cyclopes, who rushed to gather at the cave entrance. But Odysseus had prepared for this exact moment. Hours earlier, when the giant asked for his name, Odysseus introduced himself simply as nobody. Take a look at this logic tree to see how the other Cyclopes processed the giant's cries for help. When Polyphemus bellows from inside that nobody is hurting me, the diagram follows their deduction. If nobody is hurting you, it must be a sickness sent by the gods. The conclusion is simple: pray to your father and let us go back to sleep. Through a preemptive lie, Odysseus neutralized overwhelming numbers with strict semantic manipulation. His foresight isolated the threat before the attack even began. Inside the cave, a new obstacle remained. The blind, enraged giant groped his way to the entrance, rolled aside the boulder, and stretched his massive arms wide, feeling the air for any man trying to slip past. How do you bypass a guard who checks everything he can touch? Odysseus realized they had to exploit the giant's daily routine, letting his flock out to graze. This schematic illustrates the mechanics of his camouflage. Under the cover of darkness, the men bound thick-wooled rams together in groups of 3. This formation creates a protected zone in the center underbelly, where a human figure fits perfectly out of reach from above and the sides. The 2 outer sheep serve entirely as physical buffers. If the giant sweeps his heavy hands along the flanks or top of the formation, he feels only wool, while the man underneath remains completely concealed. Odysseus himself clung tightly beneath the largest lead ram. As he reached the exit, Polyphemus paused, running his giant hands across the animal's back. The monster lingered, speaking softly to the sheep, completely unaware of the man holding his breath just inches below. The giant released the ram, allowing them to pass. Careful calculation rendered raw power completely useless, resulting in a flawless tactical escape. Free from the cave, the men dropped from the sheep, stole the flock, rushed to their ship, and pushed off the shore. But as the shoreline receded, Odysseus's cold logic gave way to a surge of adrenaline and a deep need for recognition. He broke operational silence. Standing at the stern, he shouted his true name, title, and lineage back to the shore. Tell them it was Odysseus, sacker of cities, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca. This taunt gave the blind giant an auditory target. Ripping a massive boulder from the hillside, Polyphemus hurled it toward the sound of the voice, crashing into the sea and creating a wave that nearly capsized the fleeing vessel. His terrified crew begged him to stop, fearing for their lives. Instead, Odysseus kept taunting. He could not tolerate a fake identity taking credit for his genius. This unforced error stripped away the cunning survivor to reveal an egotist. His fatal flaw exposed itself clearly, a pride that demands an audience. Revealing his true identity was a catastrophic strategic failure. Polyphemus finally had a specific name to target. The blind giant raised his hands to the heavens and prayed to his father, Poseidon. Using Odysseus's exact name, he demanded divine vengeance. This timeline maps the immediate impact of the curse. What should have been a straightforward voyage of a few weeks violently fractures into a jagged 10-year path. The curse dictates 4 specific conditions: a delayed return, the loss of men, the destruction of ships, and ultimate suffering at home. Tracking along this extended path, we see the complete depletion of his crew and resources at chaotic points throughout the journey. Deep beneath the waves, the sea god heard the prayer. The fury of the ocean itself turned directly against the hero. A quick, manageable journey instantly transformed into a decade of agonizing loss and constant peril. A brilliant intellect freed Odysseus from the monster's cave, but his arrogant pride ultimately enslaved him to 10 years of suffering. The hero's greatest enemy, in the end, was himself.